Hi everybody, my name's Rebecca and welcome to My Bookish Travels. Today I am going to be discussing all of the books that I read in the month of January, which actually was a lot more than I thought I got through. I got through 6 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, and 2 paperback novels. All in all, not a bad month. The first book that I read in the month of January was Pointing to the Promise, an Advent Study Guide by Kayla Ferris. It was partnered with the First Five app for their Advent for 2020. If you guys are not familiar with First Five, it is a production of Proverbs 31 Ministries, which is set as women helping women study the Bible further. And I really enjoyed the Advent study itself, but I found that the actual guide was very lacking in what was produced. I found that at times the content was very disconnected from what we had talked about, or what we had read about, I should say, on the app. I also found that the author didn't have as much knowledge in the subject that she was discussing, because there were times where she would state something and it didn't actually match with what she was using as a reference. And I also found that at times the author herself was putting something into what was being said about the verse rather than what the verse itself was saying. So my mom, my sister, and I did this Advent guide together, as well as the study. We, again, all three of us had very similar opinions on how much we enjoyed the actual study, but we found that there were certain things we didn't fully appreciate when it came to the guide. So for that reason, I am giving the actual guide 2 out of 5 stars. One thing I did find quite interesting, this is the first time I've bought an e-guide from this company, and the way that they send it is in 2 formats. The first is for a digital copy that you can print, and the second is a digital copy that you can actually put your answers into it. So you could keep a digital copy for yourself that has your answers connected, so you don't actually have to print it. The next book that I read in January was Luca by Sarah Brienne, and I'm doing a reread of the series in the audiobook formats. So it's read by Erin Landon, and this is the 4th of the series of Made Men. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I will state that Erin Landon's narration does get better as the books progress. The first few, quite shaky, but I'm absolutely loving his voicing for the characters. Definitely pulls me out of the world that I'm living in and pulls me into this mafia world. So a few actual points that I can share with you to kind of excite you about it and maybe encourage you to read it. The first is, it is a mafia series. It is dark, it is very realistic, and it begins more at a young adult stage and it's transitioned to new adult, and I feel like it's on its route to going to an adult stage. I'm a very big hand talker, so be prepared for that. If you guys like mafia stories and you have not read anything by Sarah Brienne, she is such a talented author, because she has this way that if you were to open up the book flat in front of you, I swear the story would just start acting out in front of you without you having to even read the words. That is how realistic this story feels. So if you guys are curious, the first book is called Nero, and yeah, that's basically hopefully enough for you guys. I feel like I'm just gushing right now. Again, this was an audiobook that I was reading, and I gave it overall 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read during the month of January was A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I ended up purchasing the Audible Definitive Edition read by Stephen Fry, and my mom and I are listening to this series together. Oh, it's so beautiful. I find that these are the perfect type of reads when it's stormy outside, or it's the fall, it's a rainy day, you're cold and you need a blanket and a hot cup of cocoa. This is the book series you should go for. So The series, in case you're not familiar with it, follows John Watson, our narrator, who comes into contact with Sherlock Holmes, and he gets pulled into all of these mysteries. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has such a way with words, and with how he's created the series, it's absolutely amazing. Overall, A Study in Scarlet, 5 out of 5. The next book that I read in January was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was my first time reading Margaret Atwood, and it was a miss, guys. It was a 1 out of 5. I think this story has really great potential for discussion and dissecting the story, but when I read fiction, I'm looking more for something that is kind of taking me out into fiction, not something that is very similar in a very scary way to things going on in the world today. It follows the Republic of Gilead, where women are no longer able to hold specific positions for work or employment in society. They fall under 3 categories: a wife, a Martha, or a handmaid. The wife is highly respected. The Martha is the maid or servant, and the handmaid is a woman who is still able to bear children. Because of toxins and a lot of things going on in the world today, they are no longer able, or I shouldn't say they're no longer able, but a lot of the women are no longer able to bear children. Therefore, handmaids step in and become the incubator for the baby. That's literally, like, they're called the vessel. The vessel. So with regards to this, you do find out as the story progresses, handmaids are supposed to be highly respected, and that is just not the case unless they are pregnant, and then they're respected. It was very disturbing reading this, and I think the author did a very good job of making it that way, but it was not what I expected. And it just was not something that I think personally I would want to read again. With the last 2 chapters in the book, I think the author did a really good job with how she completed the story, and finding out that she's written a sequel, I just feel like it's a money grab, because I feel like this one ended so well that there wasn't actually a need to write a sequel. How she ended it, it just left it a specific way that, I don't know. Do you feel that she needed to write a sequel? Like, if you've read the sequel, did you feel it was needed? There we go. That's a better one. So 2 questions. 1, do you feel that there was a need for the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale? Number 2, if she wrote it, with writing it and with you reading it, did you like it? And did you feel it was necessary to the story? Let me know what you think, because I definitely think that this was good with the ending of how she had done it. The next book that I read was another Audible, and it was actually an Audible original, and it was called Call Me God: The Untold Story of the DC Sniper Investigations. My mom and I like listening to audiobooks together, specifically true crime, and this one, it takes place back in 2002 with the DC Sniper. If you guys are not familiar with this story, it is utterly petrifying what was taking place. Even just reliving it, listening to the audio was quite terrifying. This was a very well done audio. I gave it 5 out of 5 overall, because you're listening to a lot of the FBI agents that were involved, as well as other specific people that were involved with the investigation. And there's a lot of things that were put in the newspaper that I wasn't aware of, because again, at 10, not really reading the newspaper. And also there were things that had not been shared, and all of a sudden they're sharing it here. And I just found that very interesting, and I very much enjoyed this information that was kind of provided in that audio, and I just found that it was very well done. Very disturbing, but very well done. The next book that I read was Habits for Happiness by Dr. Tim Sharp, or as he always says, Dr. Happy. This is an Audible original. I was really loving the audio books in January. I will not lie, just loved them. They were on point, beautifully done. So this one actually was interesting because beginning of January, I decided to do a little bit more focusing on some health and self, care. And it was really interesting listening to him talking about very realistic ways to produce and encourage happiness in your life, and actually having some reinforcement on things that I was already doing, that he was saying, do this and you will start to feel happier. And it was nice to kind of get that from somebody who is not connected to me whatsoever. Don't we love getting advice from third parties? Parents say it, we might not follow it, but somebody else does, and we're like, you're a genius! He gave a lot of really good points, and I found that they were very realistic in the fact that they were stuff that you were able to do. But I found it very interesting. I don't know when it got produced, either at the start, the middle, the end of last year, but they put in a bonus episode, and it was Habits for Happiness in Isolation. And he basically goes back through each of the individual habits and how you can do that during quarantine and in isolation and working from home, and how you can really boost your happiness. And I really like that they added that. I think it was something that, especially with the situation with how everybody was feeling during COVID, it was nice to kind of have certain things where it's like, you should continue this. You should do this. And it's virtually up to you if you're going to or not. But I think that was really, really key and critical in having that said, where it's like, no, it's not like you have to be able to do your everyday normal this and that and whatever. You can still do it from the safety of your home. You don't have to have A, B, or C to do it. So in general, Habits for Happiness, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that my mom and I ended up listening to together was The Halifax Slasher. I don't know who the narrator is for this. She is from Halifax originally, but this one was a true crime, and I had never heard of before. It took place in Halifax over in the UK, not here in Canada, and it took place slightly before World War II, so you have a lot of unknown situations. You have Hitler being a big influence in, causing a lot of chaos and alarm for a lot of people, but the small town of Halifax ended up having a slasher that was going and slashing a number of victims, young women. And I'm not meaning like slasher like this, I mean slasher like this, to the point that they may actually need stitches, or even, having quite deep wounds that are going to leave massive, massive scars. I found it very interesting listening to this because it was something that I had never heard of before. Like, if I say Jack the Ripper, you've heard of the stories of Jack the Ripper. If you haven't, you at least know the name. The Halifax Slasher is something I'd never heard of before, and had me quite intrigued, and had no idea how the story was going to unfold and how it was going to be completed. My mom and I were quite disturbed with the story, but we also were so shocked with everything that was being said about it, because this isn't, it seemed so wild thinking about it. Actually, I think the best way to state it is, there was one night we had listened to a couple of episodes and I was so disturbed, I didn't even want to sleep alone. I left my room and I went into my mom's room and I'm like, I am sleeping with you tonight. I'm not sleeping alone. Like, I'm a chicken. I don't really watch horror, okay? I get very, very scared very, very easily. Like, if you ask people, they will agree with me. This had me petrified. Like, petrified. Like, I didn't even want to go out after dark because it had me so freaked out. I would state, just for trigger warnings, because it is dealing with somebody who is cutting people, if cutting is a trigger for you, do not listen to this audiobook. If anybody else has listened to this audio, like, what were your thoughts on it? Because I don't even know what to say. Anyway, I overall, for the storytelling and for, how well they had produced this content, I gave it 5 out of 5. The next one was Sapphire Blue by Kirsten Gier. This is the second in the Ruby Red or Gem trilogy. I absolutely love this series. I've read the book series in physical format a few times, and this is my first time listening to it through as an audiobook, and I love the narrator for it. She just has such a way with how she's narrating it that even with the characters, like, she's just gifted. Very, very gifted. Obviously, 5 out of 5 for the narration, the storytelling, the actual writing, everything. I love it. I will tell you that it deals with time travel. Our main character, Gwen, did not know that she was the gene carrier for the female line of her family. She always thought it was her cousin, Charlotte, who had that gene. And there's also Gideon, who is the male descendant of the male line for the time travel. I found it very well done. I think the author just made it very unique with regards to the storytelling. And also, when you're dealing with time travel, sometimes it can get confusing between the past and the present, and there's certain things that can always get jumbled up or you can get confused on because it can get so complicated at times with how someone's explaining time travel, that the author just made it very simplistic in the way of making it understandable so you're not getting confused on things. Also, throw in some mystery because the head of the lodge, who has the chronograph, which is the time travel machine, hello H.G. Wells, we have Count Saint Germain, who is in the past, you know, the head of the lodge. He's the Grand Master of the lodge, and he is still in communications with the present day Grand Master, and he's still pulling wires and cords and kind of showcasing all that's going to go on. I loved this series so much. Like, I can't even. It's beautiful. You should read it if you haven't. So the next book that I read was The Sign of Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the second book in the Sherlock Holmes series, again narrated by Stephen Fry. My mom and I loved this one. This one is really well done because it starts pulling in a lot of things that I think for the time that it was written in wasn't as well known for, you know, history and for the things that were taking place in the story. Both my mom and I saw our favorite character appear in the story, which is Toby. Probably not what you thought I was going to say, but my mom and I love Toby. If you guys have seen The Great Mouse Detectives, you will understand why Toby is our favorite character. Toby is just a wonderful, wonderful character, and he should have been in every single story, and he should have been like the sidekick to these men in all of the stories, not just like right here in The Sign of Four. He should have just been everywhere. Like, if I could get some Toby merch, I would buy Toby merch. In general, Sign of Four, 5 out of 5 stars. The next book was Bedtime Stories for Cynics, and this was an Audible original, and this one was actually a disappointment. This one I gave 1 out of 5 stars. They stated that they were more for adults, so based on the title and hearing that, I was thinking, it probably is going to be going more with the traditional fairy tales, or B, they're just going to kind of put some modern day isms into it. I didn't realize when they said adult, they were meaning it was going to be like full adult, like not appropriate for like anyone under the age of 18 or any age is my thinking for it. I did not like it at all. I ended up having to actually force myself to listen to one of them each day so that I knew that I would progress to the end. The next book that I read is The Father of Her Child, which is a Harlequin comic. It's got the actual author of the novel, and then it's got the manga artist that did this version. So I will tell you that Harlequin comics are probably my guilty pleasure. I love reading them because I can get through them so fast, and they're just a lot of fun. I love manga and I love romance, and I love being able to get through a book in like 30 minutes or less, and this is kind of what they are like. So The Father of Her Child is one that I actually was very disappointed with. It's 2 out of 5 stars. So I just found that it was not as well done. be it the story either didn't have a lot of meat to it, or I found that the manga just didn't produce a lot of, you know, the storyline, but I just found that it was really lacking. It felt very basic and very much like a first draft for me. The final book that I read in the month of January was The Impossibility of Tomorrow by Avery Williams. I absolutely love this cover. Even for the first book, the cover was gorgeous. Again, because it's a sequel and this is actually the completion of the duology, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will tell you a little bit of the basis. So the series is regarding incarnates, and basically the beginning of the story began many centuries ago, where our main character Seraphina comes in contact with a boy named Cyrus at a masked ball, and Seraphina inadvertently gets killed. Yeah, you probably were either expecting me to say that or you weren't expecting me to say that. But because it's dealing with incarnates, Cyrus basically gives Seraphina a certain alchemy to drink, and it separates her soul from her body, and she is able to transfer herself into another person's body. And some things take place from there that bring us to modern day with the story of what's taking place. So I actually loved the first book. I really loved this one as well. I really love the series in general, but I only gave this 4 out of 5 stars because I felt like the ending, there was just something that I didn't appreciate that happened that I felt like defeated the entire purpose of the story. And that's my viewpoint on it. But I did actually tag one thing that I wanted to read to you guys because I feel like it is such a beautiful line, and it's so perfect for, I think, anybody in general. So this is what it says. I think suddenly that my life has been made of nothing but doorways. A whole house full of doors. Some I walk through many times, back and forth. And some I only walk through once. They lock behind me. They are doors made of consequences that cannot be undone. Is that not like such a true line for all of us? Like, yes, it's a very true line. I felt very connected with that line. So I tabbed it because I really liked it. But in general, I just found that there were certain things that were left unanswered. I found that there was something that was done that I just felt was lacking for the direction the story was going in. This series I do recommend. It definitely is like a really quick read. I found it very fun and very suspenseful reading it, and I think that the author did a really good job of slowly revealing things as you progress through the 2 books rather than, you know, just giving everything all at once. I really enjoyed her writing, and the first book in this series actually was the author's debut novel, which I found very interesting. The first book in this series is called The Alchemy of Forever. I'm just blown away. Her writing is fantastic. I don't know if she's written anything else, but I really enjoy her writing. I think she is very gifted, and I think that there was a lot of thought that was put into how the story kind of unfolded and how it was resolved. Even though I myself did not fully agree with the ending, I think that there might be some people that do. Again, I think when it comes to series, endings are sometimes controversial to what you're wanting them to be. So all in all, I loved it, gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and that's kind of the last book I read in January. So that is the end of my wrap up for the month of January. If you guys would like to share some of the books that you read in January, or if you've read some of the ones that I talked about, what did you guys think? What's interesting for me is I was very surprised by the actual stats for what I read in January. I read a total of 12 books, which definitely was more than I had planned to. I had only planned to actually read 10 books in January. And when it came to the format that I read in, it was definitely a win more for the audiobooks. I didn't even touch any hardcovers in January. When it came down to it for the actual genres that I read, I was very surprised with the breakdown of what I had read during the month. I read one self-help book, and that was Habits for Happiness. I ended up reading 3 young adult novels, which doesn't surprise me. I read one religious novel. I read 2 true crime. I read one comic or manga. I don't know, it kind of falls under manga more than comic. And then I also ended up reading one classic, which was The Handmaid's Tale. What I'm really excited about is the actual star ratings for the books. So I only read 2 books that were 1 star, and I read 2 books that were 2 stars. I didn't actually read any 3 stars, which meant that I didn't actually have any where I was just feeling meh about, which is what I do prefer having. I like books that I can be a little bit more discerning on if I like it or not. I read one 4-star book and I ended up reading 5 5-stars. So all in all, I think that January was definitely a win for my reading. So again, what did you guys think about your reading in January? Do you find that you had more that you liked than you disliked? Did you read more than you thought you would? Did you read a certain format more than you thought you would? I'm used to reading more physical than audio, so I was quite surprised that I was feeling the audio more. Anyway, I will talk to you guys in my next video. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you then. Bye. Oh, my back. Oh, I gotta stop making these noises around my niece. She started making them now. Oh, she's too young to be making those noises. I'm too young to be making these noises. What am I saying? I don't want to do like a whole video and you guys are like, why did you post that? I don't want to hear about that.